Hello Year 9 and welcome to our first ever flipped classroom session. So what I'm going to get you to do today is watch over this, make sure that you take down any questions that you might have, and we will discuss it in class together as a group. Here we go. The conceptual framework. So there are 4 agencies in the conceptual framework which interact with one another. So we look at the artwork, the world, the artist, and the audience. So it's about the relationship between these agencies, we call them. In science, you might have looked at something like this, the food web, the interactions and relationships between different organisms. So you've got how the butterfly interacts with lavender, and the frog eats the butterfly and the python eats the frog. So not so eaty, but we're looking at how different organisms interact with one another in the art world, in an art sense. So here is the conceptual framework illustrated. So you have the artwork in the middle, and it's impacted, or it has a relationship between the artist, the world, and the audience. But these different agencies also interact with one another. So how does the artist influence the audience? How does the world influence the artist? And that's what we studying art look at. So let's break down these agencies in better detail. So you have the artwork. The artwork itself can be 2, 3, or 4 dimensional. So we've looked at painting and drawing. We've looked at sculpture and architecture. We're going to look at 4-dimensional works. So recordings, performances, and time-based works. So these artworks reflect ideas, personal experiences, cultural views, symbolic interpretation. So we've looked at the 4 frames, but make sure not to get the frames mixed up with the conceptual framework. The frames are more about the artwork itself. The conceptual framework is about different agencies working together or in opposition from each other. So we've looked at the frames. Don't get it confused. They do work together, but we're going to look at those in class a bit more later on. So you have the artist. The artist is anyone who really creates a work. So we consider the role of the artist, who they are, what they do, how and why they do it, and we look at the artist and how they're influenced by a particular agency. So it could be influenced by the world, either their personal or the global world. We look at how the audience influences the artist. So an audience could be family or friends, or even just the greater general public. The artists themselves, they might not be just an individual, but they could also be a group. So some artists work together and create collaborative works, or it could be a movement. So there's a lot of movements like flash dance mobs, so they can be considered performance art. So they go out into a public sphere and do their do. So that's how art is being changed. The ideas of what an artwork is reforming in our time, which is exciting. We also have the world. So we consider things that are going on in the world and how these influence artists and audiences as well. So a lot of, say, the Trump saga in America at the moment, how is that influencing different artists, and how does it influence us? What do we see? What do we feel? And then if an artist creates a work, how would we respond to that? So the world agency is really focusing on the setting in which the art is made and how it responds to that culture, I guess. So if you have any questions about this, if this is confusing you, write it down. We'll discuss it a bit more in class when we break down an actual artwork together. So the last thing we consider is the audience. So it can be art critics, historians, generally the general public, how we bring our own experiences and understandings and how we value different works. So what I might find as an amazing artwork due to my background, you might not think it's so good because you haven't studied what I have. So that's an example. So as art students, you are represented here. You are considered an audience. We go to art galleries. We went to the Tamworth Art Gallery, and some of you were like, oh, I could have done that. That's how you interpret an artwork, and maybe that's how the artist wanted you to feel. So we're going to look at how these interconnections work a bit more in class. We're going to do a bit more of a hands-on activity. So just a quick analysis. We've got here Graham. Graham's a silicon, so a plastic sculpture. It looks a bit repulsive. He's made with human hair, and he's obviously sort of alien-like. So he is a commissioned work, so someone's paid to have him made by the Victorian Transport Commission, because they wanted to show what humans would need to look like to survive car crashes. So pretty much no skull, no neck, a thick skull, no neck, and a rib cage with mini airbags in it. So while Piccinini was commenting on the vulnerability of the human body, she's also talking about if we could choose our anatomy, so our bodies, to suit our environment, would we? So she looks at human genetic engineering. So a lot of her works are based on changing our bodies to suit our environment and how future generations could adapt to, like, say, live on Mars. So from what I've just said, what could you possibly tell me about each agency? So what world is she responding to? Is she responding to a global world or a personal world? The artwork itself, what would you tell me about that? The artist, why is Piccinini doing the said work? Is it in her character, or is she stepping out of her comfort zone? And the audience, what do you feel? What is she trying to get out of the audience? So you can see that if you're looking at that, you would talk about the audience, the artwork, and the artist, how they connect, that interconnection. It's everything is connected. So why do we do this? Like, a lot of you are probably like, who cares? But it is important. When you study art, so you as students, you can use the conceptual framework to arrange your ideas. So it'll help you consider the relevance of the information you gather. So you can categorize the information into those 4 agencies, so you don't have things flying around. They are all structured. Also, more about, it's a reflective tool for why you make art. So it wants you to consider what events in the world or your world that have influenced you. It wants you to think about artworks that have resonated with you and why you create works, what influences you. As an artist, it wants you to think about other artists. Who has inspired you? What have they done? Why do they do it? And lastly, it wants you to think about your audience. So why are you creating works? What do you want people to think about or feel when they look at your works? So it can be used as a tool for theory and prac. But in class, we're going to use it a bit more towards your own works and analysing those. Hopefully you've come to a bit of an understanding about the conceptual framework. So we're going to leave that here. Hopefully you've got some questions for me in class, and I look forward to speaking to you all tomorrow.